I have a question for you. A Nazir, that's the person we're learning about these days, he cannot become impure. He cannot touch a dead body. A Kohen, like David is a Kohen, he also cannot touch a dead body. So what happens if a Nazir and a Kohen are walking down the road and they see a dead body? Somebody needs to bury it. Who should become impure? The Nazir or the Kohen? You say both? Both should become impure. What do you think, David? The Kohen should become impure. How come? A Kohen, that's what he is. He says a Kohen is like inherently holy. He didn't do anything for it. The Nazir made an oath, so it's more...
It could be the other way around.
Okay. What's the other way around?
The other way around is that the Kohen is the one that really... So I don't know the answer to that question because of it. No.
The Kohen is inherently holy,
Right. So
and the Nazir is just holy for now.
right.
Okay, we're going to see in today's chapter about this. Hilchos Nezirus Perek Shvi. The laws of the Nazir, chapter 7. Of course, it's Sunday morning today, so Shul's a little bit more noisy in the background, just forgive it. And we are continuing on the laws of the Nazir, specifically the laws related to becoming impure. There are 3 things that a Nazir cannot do. He cannot drink any wine derivatives, he cannot shave his hair, and he cannot become impure to a dead body. Yesterday we discussed what happens if the Nazir violates each of these prohibitions. And today we're going to get deep into the 3rd prohibition, the prohibition of becoming impure to a dead body. And essentially what the Rambam is going to tell us is that although yesterday we learned that when a Nazir becomes impure to a dead body, he needs to shave his hair, bring sacrifices, and reset the clock, restart the count on his term, it's not true of every type of impurity. There are many ways that a corpse could transmit impurity. We're going to learn about them all in detail in the Rambam's 10th book. Today the Rambam is going to tell us that there's generally 2 categories of impurity. Some impurities force the Nazir to go through the whole shaving sacrificial process. Other impurities, while he has to become pure again, he has to get the ashes of the para aduma, the red heifer sprinkled on him, it doesn't destroy the count. He doesn't have to shave or bring sacrifice. That's the theme of today's chapter, to go into the details of which types of impurities affect him to which levels. Says the Rambam halacha aleph, yesh tumais min hameis. There are certain impurities that are transmitted by a corpse. She'ein hanazir megaleach aleihan v'lo yisayser es hakaidmin. That the Nazir doesn't have to shave over them. It doesn't destroy the previous days. Va'afal pisha nitma bahen tumas shiva. Even though, ritualistically speaking, or tuma speaking, impurities, on the level of impurity, he becomes impurity with the most severe level, 7-day impurity from a dead body. It doesn't matter. It doesn't force him to shave his head. Because if you look in the Torah, the wording in the verse, it doesn't say v'chiyitma lanefesh, if he becomes impure to a dead body. It doesn't say that. If it would say that, then it would mean that any type of impurity violates his Nezirus. What does it say? Ella v'chiyamus meis alav. These are the words here, the red words. It says, when a dead body dies on him. It's a very extreme expression, which basically means ad sheyitma mitumais shehein me'atzmei shel meis. In order for the Nazir to completely destroy his count, he needs to become impure in a way that involves the substance of the corpse, the actual dead body. And then he has to bring sacrifices of impurity, shave the shaving of impurity, and destroy all the first counts. But other than that, no. And we're going to see that there's going to be basically 24 categories of impurity. 12 are going to force the Nazir to shave, 12 are not going to force the Nazir to shave. So here we go. And the following impurities from a dead body will force the Nazir to shave. Just remind you for a second, there are 3 ways to become impure from a dead body. You can touch it, that's called maga. You can carry it, even if you don't touch it, that's called masa. And you can be in the same room as it, that's called oyhel, the tent. So most of these impurities can be transmitted in all 3 ways. There are going to be a few that only come in 2 of the 3 ways, or 1 of the 3 ways, as we'll discuss. So we begin with the 12 types of impurity which will force the Nazir to shave. First of all, al-hanefel, a stillborn fetus. If a Nazir touches a stillborn fetus, he has to destroy his count. Even if the fetus is in such an early stage of development that the connecting sinews for the limbs haven't even been formed yet. That's number one. Number two, an olive-sized portion of flesh from the corpse. Number three, netzel, an olive-sized portion of netzel. Netzel that Rambam will define in the end of this halacha. It's basically if a corpse flesh became dissolved into liquid. That's netzel. Number four, va'alatzamos shehem roiv minyan ha'atzamos afal pi she'ein bohen roiv ha'akav. Bones that make up the majority of the number of bones in a human being, even if they don't come to what's called a roiva hakav. Roiva hakav means a quarter of a kav. Kav is a dry measurement in halacha, and usually to transmit impurity you have to have a quarter of a kav of bones if you want to become impure from a dead body. So a kav is 1,376 cubic centimeters. So it's pretty small. Now there's one exception to that. If you touch a pile of bones that constitutes the majority of the number of bones in a body, even if they don't equal to that measurement, let's say it's the bones of a small baby. So the majority of his bones together won't reach a quarter of a kav. But since it's the majority of a skeleton, so therefore you become impure to the point of having to shave on it. Similarly, if you touch a pile of bones that makes up the majority of the skeletal frame, the Rambam defines this in the 10th book. It's basically the majority of the upper torso with one leg of the skeleton. So if you're looking at this pile of bones, you would see the majority of a human figure. Even if it isn't the majority of the number of bones, even if it doesn't equal to a quarter of a kav in volume measurement, it's enough to impurify the Nazir to the point that he has to shave. Similarly, if he touches a half of a kav of bones, again, a kav is 1,376 cubic centimeters, which half of that would be 688 cubic centimeters of bones. Okay? Even though that amount of bones doesn't constitute most of the skeletal frame or most of the number of bones in the adult human body, it doesn't matter. Any time a pile of bones makes a person impure, it has to all come from one person, one dead body, not from two. Another type of impurity, if you touch the spine of a corpse, or the full skull of a dead person, or a full limb from a corpse, from one corpse. A limb from a living person that got detached, which has enough flesh and bone and sinew that had it been attached to the human body, it could have regenerated just from that amount of flesh. And for a half of a log of blood, which comes from one corpse. Typically, to make a person impure, you only have to have a revi'it, a quarter of a log of blood. But here, for a Nazir to become impure to the point of shaving, you have to have a half of a log from one person again. It can't be combined. And also a fistful of decomposed corpse mass. The body decomposes, the mass, like a powdery mass. If you have you have a fistful of that makes you impure. So the Rambam just returns for a second to define that word. We mentioned before, netzel. Ezehu netzel. What's considered netzel? Zeh besar hameis. It's corpse flesh. Shenimayach v'nasa leichos rucha. It became putrid into a liquid. It dissolved into a liquid. These are all sources of impurity. Now, the last one on the list was rakav hameis, decomposed corpse mass. So the Rambam says, ve'ein rakav hameis metame ad sheyikaver arum ba'aren shel shayish. Decomposed mass of a corpse only makes a person impure if the corpse was buried naked in a marble coffin. Because, why marble? Because marble doesn't decompose. So you can be sure that all that's in this decomposed mass is only corpse flesh. V'yekule shalem, plus the corpse had to be complete in its form. Chaser mimenu ever, if the corpse was missing a part of the body, or he was buried in clothing, so now that the decomposed mass contains more than just flesh, it's flesh and clothing, or a wooden coffin or a metal coffin, metal becomes rusty, wood becomes decomposed. So ein leirakav. So now this dead body won't have the decomposed mass because there's in here a mix of the dead body plus the coffin or whatever other articles, the clothing or whatever it is. So it doesn't count. Also, the whole law of decomposed mass only applies to a person who died naturally, excluding a murdered person because some of his blood left his body upon the act of murder. Similarly, if two corpses were buried together, or they shaved the dead person's hair or cut his nails and buried them together with the body, so there's two entities now that are decomposing together. Or a pregnant woman died and was buried with the fetus in her womb. Their decomposed mass doesn't communicate impurity because it's two entities, not one. God forbid a person were to grind the corpse until it becomes decomposed powder. That doesn't transmit impurity unless it decomposes on its own naturally. But if a person, nobody, but let's say the Nazis did this to human beings, so then you would have to know, yeah, it wasn't done exactly. This is extreme, but you have to adjust the case because this, if there was a pogrom against Jews, right? The Goyim came and killed a bunch of Jews and did this to their bodies, would the Nazir become impure through this type of contact? But if God forbid a person were to grind the dead body and then leave the ground substance until that became decomposed, or the person was very sick while he was alive, part of his body decomposed while he was alive, and then the rest after he died, in these last two cases, there's a doubt in the Gemara, and therefore, if a Nazir were to become impure to touch such a decomposed powder, it would put him in a doubtful status of impurity. Similarly, if a person went under the same roof as a quarter of a kav, not a half, a quarter of a kav of bones that come from the spine or from the skull, also a doubtful case. We're in doubt whether he's impure, so we don't rule him for sure impure. Halacha hey. Kol elu hashtemes retumes shemaninu, all these 12 categories of impurity which we just enumerated. Im naga nazir ba'achas mehen, oy nisa'a, in either of the three types of ways. If the Nazir were to touch such a mass, carry such a mass, oy ha'ehil hanazir aleha, oy ha'ehil hatuma al hanazir, or the Nazir would have, yes, he would have created a roof, walked over such a mass, or that mass would have been carried over him. Or he and one of these masses was under the same roof. These impurities forced him to shave, the shaving of impurity, to bring the sacrifices of impurity, and also to destroy his count of Nezirus. With the exception of the decomposed mass, like I said before, some of them don't transmit impurity in all the ways. Rakav, the decomposed mass, will make you impure if you carry it, or if you're in the same room as it. But she'ene mitame b'maga, it doesn't make you impure by touching it. Why? Because what is decomposed mass? It's powder. It's not one entity. Because it isn't one body, it's impossible to touch it all at once. But if you would carry it or become impure by being in the same room as it, or making a roof over it, then you would have to shave. It makes you fully impure. Similarly, if a Nazir were to touch or carry the bone of a dead body, even the smallest size of a barley corn, he would have to shave, bring sacrifices of impurity, and destroy his previous count. But the barley corn-sized bone does not transmit impurity by being under the same roof or making a roof over it. So those two are the ones that don't have all three options of becoming impure. The rakav, the decomposed powder, and the bone that's a small size. Otherwise, all of the other 12 make you impure in all three ways. But that's the category of types of impurities that makes you destroy the Nazir count. Now there's 12 other types of impurities that while they make you impure, and you have to get the para aduma ashes sprinkled on you and everything, it doesn't destroy the Nazir count. But if the person becomes impure in one of the following 12 ways, what are the following 12 ways? Says the Rambam, number 1, Begush eretz ha'iv lekechavim mazalis. Earth from outside of Israel. Earth from outside of Israel, because Goyim weren't careful where they buried their dead, the sages decreed that all earth outside of Israel makes you impure. That's why today we're all impure from dead bodies. So if a Nazir were to touch a clod of earth from outside of Israel, or he walks into a field, even in Israel, where you know that there was a grave that was plowed through, so now you don't know where the bones are. There's a rabbinic decree to make it impure. Which such entities make you impure if you touch them or carry them. Or there was a roof that was created between you and one of the 12 primary sources of impurity, but not a regular roof, not a roof of a home. Those last words, Val achas min hashtei mesrei, are not in most standard Rambams, but they're in the authentic texts. What kind of a roof? Another kind of a roof. For example, hasarigim hayotzim min ha'ilanis, branches coming out of a tree. So you're not in the same roof as a building. There's a tree covering you and this element from the dead body. Oy haprois hayotzis min hageder, or protrusions coming out of a fence. Oy mita, or a bed. Oy gamal v'chayotze boy, or off of a camel. So these are types of roofs that are not permanent roofs. Or you have a quarter of a kav of bones. And you were in the same room as them, but the quarter of a kav did not have the majority of the skeletal frame or the majority of number of bones in the human body. So it makes you impure, but not to the level of shaving and destroying the count. Or a quarter of a log. A revi is about 3 ounces of blood from a dead body, which transmits impurity fully by touching, by carrying, and by a tent, by being in the same roof. Or you became impure through the top or side supports of a grave. In times of old, they used to have in a caver, the caver was actually a structure made out of stone, and there would be or other things. And there would be a goylel, which was the cover, or a doifik, which was a side support. They make you impure if you touch them or you're under the same roof as them. Or you became impure by touching a limb that detached from a live person or from a dead person, but there wasn't enough flesh on them. In all these 12 cases, you don't destroy the count. Even though in all these cases you're impure for 7 days, you have to have the ashes of the para aduma, the red heifer, sprinkled upon you on the 3rd and 7th day. You don't have to shave, shaving of impurity, no bringing sacrifices, no destroying the count. But all the days for which you're impure don't count towards your Nazir count. It goes on pause for like 7 days. Once you become pure, the count continues. Halacha ches, naga be'oyel hameis. A Nazir touches an object which is a tent over a dead body. So here you see this dead body in the room. This guy is touching the room from the outside. Oy bekelim hanoigim b'meis. Or he's touching a utensil which is touching a dead body. You have a blanket over a dead body. He is touching the blanket. Or some say it has to be a metal vessel. Point is, he's touching a vessel or utensil that's touching the dead body. This is a special rule that Rambam says. You don't have to get the ashes of the red heifer sprinkled on you on 3rd or 7th day. The Rambam says this law is unique to a Nazir. But any other person who became impure by touching a utensil which is touching a dead body, or making a roof over a dead body, he has to get sprinkled by the ashes of the paraduma, as we're going to explain in the laws of impurity from a corpse. It also seems to me, the reason that a Nazir shouldn't have the ashes sprinkled on him, in this case, where he touches the vessels touching a dead body, is it's to allow the days of impurity, that he becomes impure because of the vessels, to count towards the count of his Nezirus. And now the Rambam introduces another concept, which is going to carry us also into the end of the chapter as well. And this is a mitzayra. It's actually coming up in next week's parsha, and 2 weeks from now, for the next 2 weeks, we're going to be learning about the tsaras. Tsaras is a skin lesion that develops on a person's skin because of speaking Lashon Hara. It's a spiritual thing, it's not a physical thing. And what happens is, when a person spots the lesion on his body, he goes to a Kohen, and sometimes the Kohen will pronounce him right away impure. Other times the Kohen will put him into quarantine. So go into a room for 7 days on your own. After 7 days, come back, we'll check the lesion. So when a mitzora, that's the person who has tzaras, is in quarantine, that's called hesger, yemei hesger, quarantine days. He's on a strict level of impurity, but not so strict. If he comes back after 7 days and the Kohen says, you're a definite mitzora, that's called hechlet. Hechlet means defined. Muchlat, defined, total, for sure a mitzora. Then he's even a higher level of impurity. So the Rambam says like this. Again, we're going to get into all these laws in detail later. When a mitzora becomes pure, when the lesion goes away, there's a whole procedure he has to follow. He needs to shave his hair, wait 7 days, shave all his hair again, and then bring certain sacrifices. So the Rambam wants to know now, how does that interplay with being a Nazir? What happens if you have a Nazir shenitztara v'huchlat? A Nazir got tzaras while he was a Nazir. He spots a lesion on his body, and it was a defined lesion. The Kohen said, you're for sure impure. So the Rambam says, Kol yemei chalutai, all the days in which he is to be left alone, he has to be outside the camp. There's a whole set of laws that applies to him. As well as the 7-day count that he has to count after becoming pure. Between the first and second shaving, all those days don't count towards his term of the Nazir. But days in which he's quarantined, waiting to find out whether his lesion is impure, those days count for the Nezirus term. Similarly, if a person experiences an unnatural emission, both a man or a woman would be a blood emission, not during her expected menstrual period, and a man would be an emission from his reproductive organ that's not urine or not semen. It's like a gonorrhea type of a thing. It's a sickness. So then, all the days in which they're under the level of impurity for being a zav, it counts for the count of the Nazir, even though they're actually impure. The davar zeh halacha l'Moshe Misinai, who this matter is a halacha received from Moshe Rabbeinu on Mount Sinai. Halacha Yud, ein tzarich leimar, needless to say, she'in nitma ha-Nazir b'shar tumais. If a Nazir became impure with any other type of impurity, he touched a dead rodent, something like that, she'yemei tum asay oilin, certainly the day that he's impure for that definitely counts. The ein yasser klum doesn't destroy the count at all. Nitma b'meis b'soich yemei tzaratay. What if a Nazir got tzaras, and while he gets tzaras, he touches a dead body? So even though we said that the days of the tzaras don't count towards your Nezirus, but you're still a Nazir. So it destroys the count of the previous days. Even though he's impure, he's still a Nazir and under those laws. Therefore, touch of that body, it ruins it. Halacha Yud Aleph. So we have 3 things that a Nazir cannot do, right? No wine, no shaving, no impurity. It says the Rambam, Ha-Nazir mutar betumas meis mitzvah ubetiglachas mitzvah. A Nazir can become impure to a dead body if it's a mitzvah, and we'll soon see what that means. And he can also shave if it's a mitzvah to shave, and we'll see when that is. V'asur b'yein ha-mitzvah ki yein reshus. But wine, even if there's a mitzvah to drink wine, he cannot drink the wine. Keitzad, what would be an example of a mitzvah wine? So here's an example. Misha nishba sheyishte hayom yayin. A person takes an oath, I swear I'll drink wine today. Sharei mitzvah alav lishtais. So now it becomes a mitzvah to drink the wine because you swore. Right after he swears he's going to drink wine, the achar kach nadar ben Nazir. The same day he takes a vow to become a Nazir. So now chola Nezirus ala shvua the asur beyayin. The Nezirus takes effect over the oath, and he cannot drink the wine because a Nazir cannot drink wine even if it's mitzvah wine. The ein tzarich loymar shehu asur beyayin kiddush v'havdalah she'ein le'elam medivrei seifrim. Certainly a Nazir cannot make kiddush or havdalah on wine because to have the wine is a rabbinic obligation. According to the Torah, you don't have to have wine. You have to say the kiddush, say the havdalah, but the wine is a rabbinic obligation. So for a Nazir, he has to make kiddush and havdalah without wine. Just say the text or listen to others, but no wine involved for him. Halacha Yud Beis v'keitzad hu mutar b'tumas meitz mitzvah. What would it mean to become impure in a mitzvah case? That means haya mahalich baderech upaga b'meis she'ein sham misha yigberenu. Nazir was traveling and he encounters a dead body where there's nobody to bury him, no relatives. He must become impure to them and bury him. And this is an oral tradition. Now, of course, once he becomes impure, he'll have to shave and bring sacrifices. All that will still exist. The point is that it's a mitzvah versus violating a prohibition. And here comes the question I asked you in the beginning of the class. It says that Rambam Malacha Yud Gimel, Nazir v'kohen shepagu b'meis mitzvah. You have a Nazir and a kohen are walking on the road, and they both meet together this dead body that nobody can bury. Who should become impure? Says the Rambam, Yitamon Nazir. Afal pishu hu seister ayamim harishonim u'meivi karban tuma. Even though it's going to force the Nazir to destroy his count and bring a sacrifice, he needs to become impure, the al yitama kohen. And David the kohen never becomes impure. Why? Says the Rambam, some of you alluded to this, Shazek kedushase kedushas shah. Because the Nazir only has a limited amount of time for his holiness. 30 days, 100 days. Even if he was a Nazir forever, happens to be, he's going to be a Nazir for his whole lifetime. But the holiness never becomes an intrinsic part of who he is. And even more, the commentaries add that if he wants, he can ask a sage to release him from his vow. So in a way, even if he's a Nazir forever, it's not really forever. A Kohen is holy forever and inherently. It's part of his DNA. He's a holy person. And therefore, it's better for the Nazir to violate his holiness and not for the Kohen. Halacha Yudalit, Pagu by Shtei Nazirim. What if you have two Nazirs walking down the road and they both encounter a dead body? Who should sacrifice? So here it depends who's longer. Echad Nazir Shloishim Yayim, the Echad Nazir Mea Yayim. If one is a Nazir for 30 days and one for 100 days, Yitama Nazir Shloishim, the 30-day guy, should become impure. If one was for a certain amount of time, one was forever. Of course, the guy who has a limited time should become impure. Because if you're a Nazir forever, you have a higher level of holiness. Not as high as a Kohen, but it's higher.
So if it's the same time, so they flip a coin?
Same time, what do you do? So the Rambam doesn't talk about it. I guess you flip a coin. They don't address it here, I don't know. Halacha tezvav. V'ketzad hu mutar b'tiglachas mitzvah. What does it mean that a Nazir can shave when it's a mitzvah? So this refers back to the mitzvah, person who got tzaras, the lesion. Nazir shenitztara. If a Nazir became a mitzvah, he got a skin lesion while he was a Nazir. V'nirpa mitzarata b'toich yemei Nezirus, and he becomes healed of his tzaras while his term is still going. Hareza megaleach kol sa'ara, he must shave all his hair. Shari tiglachto mitzvah saseh, because shaving for a mitzvah who becomes pure is a positive mitzvah. Shenemar ba mitzvah, here it says, here's the verse, next week's portion, or 2 weeks from now. V'gilach es kol sa'ara, he must shave all his hair. V'chol makom sha'ata moitzeh, mitzvah saseh v'lei saseh. The rule is, whenever you have a positive commandment against a negative commandment, im yachol lekayem es shneim mutav, if you can do them both, good. V'im lav yava yaseh v'yitches le saseh, if you can't, the positive commandment always wins. So here you have a negative commandment not to shave. You have a positive commandment as a mitzvah to shave. So you shave. Now the Rambam asks, 1 second. A Nazir isn't just a negative commandment, he's both. A Nazir who shaves in his Nazir time would transgress a positive and a negative commandment. Here's the green. He should be holy and grow the locks of his hair. A positive commandment can supersede a negative commandment, but a positive commandment cannot override a negative and a positive. So why should the positive commandment of shaving for the mitzvah push away the Nazir term, the Nazir shaving? Says the Rambam, in this case, the Nazir is already impure. He's impure from tzaras. The days in which he's impure aren't counting towards his term. So he isn't holy in those days, so the positive commandment doesn't apply. The positive commandment is cancelled automatically. All that remains is the negative commandment. The razor can go on his head. Therefore, the positive commandment of the shaving can come and push away what remains, just the negative commandment, and push it away. The Ravid gives another reason. He says, the Nazir can always absolve his vow. So in a way, there's not really a commandment that's present. It's not two commandments fighting, because they can just go away in a second. But the Rambam gives the other reason. The Rambam gives the reason that while you're tamei, there is no positive commandment. Only a negative, and a positive can win over the negative.